Hello and welcome to yet another episode of BIZE Talks presents Real Business Lessons. So, LinkedIn and YouTube, I'm going to start today's session with a small story. Once upon a time, I was a child and I used to say a lot of stories to my parents, to my teachers, to my friends, to my colleagues. But when I grew up, I tend to be more direct, more straightforward, right? And not say stories. But as a startup founder, all of a sudden people started saying that storytelling has to be an art of pitching. And I wonder why. So, for this topic, I am today inviting with us not one but two esteemed experts in storytelling, Mr. Sachin and Miss Meenakshi. Hi Sachin, hi Meenakshi.
Hi,
Hi, hi,
Rakesh.
Rakesh.
Okay, so let's start with a small introduction. Sachin, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, sure. Rakesh and everyone who's listening, my name is Sachin Bhandary. I run a company called the Storyco, which is a business storytelling coaching and training firm. The premise of the company is fairly simple that if I ask anyone about, stories from their childhood or superheroes and mythology and all of that, people remember so many things, right? Whether it's
Hmm.
Krishna, Superman, Spider-Man. But if I ask anyone about a business presentation from last week, most people would scratch their heads. The reason for that is fairly simple. Stories are the best form of communication for the human mind. It helps us retain,
Hmm.
it is what influences us. And hence, I try to use the power of stories through coaching, training, and consulting to help companies, startups, and individuals, multiply the success rate either in sales, in fundraising, or even in team building or leadership. Yeah, that's what I do.
Great. On to you, Meenakshi.
Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. And to talk about myself, to introduce myself, I would like to say that at my core, I'm a creative, whimsical person who loves people, loves conversations, and loves stories. And as a business storyteller in my professional journey, I find myself to be very lucky to be able to mix the three of them together. And how I use that on a daily basis is that I work with founders, and as so me and my business partner Sandeep, we started a company called
Hmm.
Untangling Labs. And the reason behind the name Untangling Labs is because we found that founders are often tangled in their own stories. They
Hmm.
founders and business leaders, for that matter, everyone is so passionate in today's world. People are solving problems innovatively and very uniquely, and finding newer new problems to solve. But often when you know talking to others and articulating these unique ways of solving problems, people get tangled in their own in the old web of execution and
Hmm.
everything that is happening. And what that results into is that the stakeholders in front of them, be it investors, be it customers, be it potential team members, they're unable to understand what really is happening. And to be able to, if you can't understand, you can't appreciate, and then you would not put your money into uh, an idea, or you would not buy a product. It results into, so basically what I often tell is that to start a business you need an idea. To run it you need to be able to execute it. To be able to spread these ideas and to win at it, you really need to be able to communicate it well. And stories are one, are a way that helps in powerfully communicating ideas and driving them out into the world. So this is what I do. And my work, though Sachin and my work have a lot of commonalities, we both use stories to help founders, help business leaders. How I so where my specific domain of work is into helping founders in their pitch decks. So
Hmm.
that's the product of what we create. But in the core of it, it's about helping founders find clarity, and to help them dive into their stories and use these stories to powerfully communicate to different stakeholders.
Right. So we started with our communication meeting Simon Sinek, focusing on why, and Sachin briefly described that the reasons of why storytelling is really important. But my question to you, Meenakshi, here is that as a child we used to tell a lot of stories, but then as we grow, we tend to lose that touch of storytelling. So, can you put some light on it as why this happens?
So this I've often found like so one of the biggest problems that we find that our founders that we work with encounter is that their own domain expertise comes in their way of being able to tell something in a way that everybody can understand. So domain expertise, I feel, as we keep growing up, we
Hmm.
it's a power to be very strong in the field that you work in, but at the same time, it's a boon when it's a bane when it comes to being able to communicate to everyone, because then you're talking so much in specific to what you know, and that creates a kind of knowledge barrier that an investor for that matter during fundraising. So founders, they are imagine. So let's talk about one of the founders that I worked with, which was in the domain of so many of them, but a particular one who was working in warehouse automation. So they were building bots, very
Hmm.
technically sound founder. They very passionate about what they do, and
Hmm.
but when talking to investors, they were they were talking like, the bots earlier we used to have 2D lidar, and they were 2D lidar was not sufficient, so we created 3D lidar. And while that is like, okay, 3D lidar must be better than 2D lidar, but for an investor who is not from the warehouse automation industry, but is someone who has money to put into tech, they're not able to appreciate really what is happening, right? So we help this founder to go back to a simplistic way of explaining things. So we helped them to find out what really is 2D lidar. Why does it matter? So we discovered that basically 2D lidar bots are not able to move from between building to building, and in a warehouse you need to. One needs to move material from one building to another. So it's just simplifying it. So simplification, I think, helps in this domain
It's very
expertise
difficult.
and knowledge
Yeah.
gathered. Yeah,
Yeah, no, Warren Buffett quoted the most difficult thing is the most simple thing to do.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so Sachin, I will talk to you more about giving the presentation to a large audience. So my
Hmm.
question to you is that even if we are prepared, even if we do a lot of mock rounds of presentation, when we are on
Hmm.
when we are up there at the stage,
Hmm.
I'm sure you also must have felt it. We have knees knocking, we have hands shaking. Uh, so, what's your weirdest presentation mishap, and how did you turn it into a shining moment?
Um, okay. So I do have quite a few presentation or public speaking mishaps rather, but the
Hmm.
one that I want to talk about, I did not, or I rather was not able to turn it into a shining moment. So, but that actually started something. So, I used to work in a PR agency called Perfect Relations, and I was a senior executive. This was, I mean, many, many years ago. I was much younger than I am today. And so, as the senior executive manager on the account, I used to present to the Godrej Group's marketing council every month. So I used to present our team's work or our PR agency's work. Now that was a
Hmm.
very difficult audience for someone like me. I was still in my early 20s or mid 20s, probably 25, 26, if I remember correctly. And
Hmm.
they were
Hmm.
all in their 40s or much older than that as well, and very very senior people who had absolutely no interest in what this 20-year-old or someone in their 20s has to say about PR and how many pieces of coverage we got, etc., etc. So all I would do is just like try to rush through the presentation as fast as possible. So that I would then be allowed to leave the room, because they would have like different agencies coming and presenting on the same day. Everybody had half an hour
Hmm.
slots. So it was
Hmm.
basically like 15-minute presentation and 15-minute discussion. So I was like, let me just get through this 15 minutes in like maybe 7 minutes or maybe five, and then my boss can just have a conversation with them, and I would be done. And I remember this day when a young uh, uh, gentleman named Adrian Terrell had joined as the head of corporate communications in Godrej Group. And this was his first marketing council presentation, the presentation where I used to present as his partner agency, right? And I was
Okay.
doing the same thing that I did every time. And as soon as we stepped out of the room, Adrian came running and he came and told me, Sachin, why do you present like the weight of the world is on your shoulders? And you just seem like in a hurry to get done with the presentation. Don't you think you should be proud of the work that you do? Because if you aren't, why do you think they would care? And that sort of struck really hard, and I told myself
Mm.
that I had been doing a great disservice not just to myself but to my agency and my team, but by not doing the best possible presentation. So uh, yeah, so after that I went and found a Toastmasters club, which is a not for profit public speaking and leadership community. And in a
I've
few
heard.
months I think I was able to do better. And Adrian, in one of the meetings, then came back and told me, I said, I really commend how you've been able to turn this thing around. And yeah, so that was a trigger for me to, I think, take my public speaking a lot more seriously. I used to be good when I was in school, but I think somewhere along the way, I sort of the interest in public speaking probably faded away a little bit. So that reignited that passion for public speaking and presenting. So yeah, so that's the moment where I realized that I need to do better.
So, what's your suggestion or recommendation to those people who feel panic when they are standing in front of the audience?
Um, so I don't think there's one tip that suits everyone, because I think
Mm.
everybody has their own approach towards public speaking and different
Right.
situations. Right now, for instance, if you are somebody who's presenting, I mean, I'm not a very big fan of using presentations or slides as crutches. I think it should be the other way around, where your
Right.
narrative and what you speak should be aided by the visual aid, because it's called visual aid for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. Uh, but uh, but the situation where you are, let's say, speaking without any visual aids, you're giving a talk. And I recently coached a founder of a, not a unicorn but a sunicorn fintech company to speak at Singapore Fintech Festival. And one of the tips is that if you're going to speak without aid and you want to give a talk, then it's really important that you just get as good as possible with the entire content of the speech, because you do not want to rely on memory while you're on stage. A lot of people say this, right? And I don't want to practice my speech too much because I don't want to come across as if, like, I've mugged my speech. But that level happens when you haven't practiced enough. If you practice in a way that even if somebody wakes you up from your sleep, you are able to deliver the speech, that is when you can start bringing a lot of improvisations on stage. So that's one. You really need to know your content. And of course, the content has to be authentic. It has to be something that you understand deeply, and hence you are talking about that topic. That's number one. Number two, I think in terms of panic, uh, it happens with the best of us first. I mean, that's the first thing that you need to remember. I mean, I've spoken on stage many times now, but every time before I go on stage, I do have butterflies in my stomach, my palms are sweaty, and my wife sometimes tells me, tu natak karta hai. You absolutely have no problem speaking on stage. You just do this drama to show us that, oh, I am scared or nervous. But it is a fact that I am nervous, and I think the day I stop being nervous about going on stage is the day that I will probably not be a, or at least not aspire to be a good public speaker. So nervousness has a role to play. But when you get on stage, I think it's important to think that with the audience, you're having a conversation. It's not a monologue.
Mm.
You're not supposed to prove that you're some kind of demigod who knows everything. It's okay to make a few mistakes, but have the humility that, hey, you know what, I'm trying my best. And the other thing that I've seen works really well is that if you are able to open with a question or with some kind of humor. So, because once you have some response from the audience and it's a conversation, it's much easier after that for you to build on that talk. And third point, I think it's I can't, overstate this, but if you really think that your career and your entrepreneurship, your business leadership is dependent on how well you speak in public, then a platform like Toastmasters or something that makes you regularly speak to an audience. So the other suggestion that I give for people who can't go to a Toastmasters club is start making reels, for yourself. Just put the phone in front of you, make it a habit to shoot one reel a day and post it, or don't post it, but at least look at the video yourself, because now with
Hmm.
technology it's so easy to get feedback, right? Earlier people are not used
Right.
to recording themselves and seeing how they, because when you look at your own video, you'll know the kind of mistakes you make, and at least I look like a fool every time that I look at myself on video, and I'm like, okay, next time I'm going to look a little bit less of a fool. So that's the other tip. So keep practicing, keep going up on stage. It's really, really important.
Wow, creating reels. Okay, that is something that I need to take a note of. Cool. Okay, so over to you, Meenakshi. Now, you are an expert of creating pitch decks, right? So my question to you is, this comes often, when you have to give a 30-second elevator pitch to a VC. How do you summarize your entire 5-year journey of a pitch deck within 30 seconds? Is there a hook which you can start with? So, what's your one sentence magic bullet that you suggest?
Well, again, it's all it's hard to put. So I am not a big fan of templatizing anything. I always feel like everyone has a unique story to tell, and that unique story, whether it be a large, comprehensive pitch deck, or it be that short elevator pitch, it needs to address to that particular startup's uniqueness, or the unique offering that they have, and why should someone care.
Hmm.
So figuring out, so I think in the beginning we always suggest that let's get the comprehensive story out, the story that you can tell in 15 minutes, then the story that you can tell in 10 minutes, and the story that you can have to tell in 30 seconds. It's again about simplifying from the complex to the leanest possible version of your story. And why should it matter? What's the most unique thing that you can tell about yourself that a VC would care about listening to, and giving you a longer meeting. So it could be different for everyone. Like for someone it could be that, for a certain industry, it could be that, a context that everybody understands. Say for example, conversational chatbot for right now. Most people have an idea about what conversational chatbots are, right? Like where you have a chatbot who's answering questions on your behalf, and people are creating it for different industries. So in this case, if you waste that 30-second about talking what the chatbot is, may not be your best bet. So maybe
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
need to talk about, say, traction. Maybe you've already sold it to some of the biggest companies and you're looking to scale forward, globally. So that might be what you use a 30-second in. For someone else who is in a domain that not everybody widely understands, say, for example, maybe biotechnology, something that is very specific to a certain domain, and somebody is doing something in that industry. So I
Hmm.
think in that case, I would suggest the founder to talk about what life was before and after, for who they are solving it for. For example, patients without them would, this large number of patients were suffering due to a particular reason, but with our solution, we have transformed the lives of, say, this many people in these countries. So it's all about figuring out what really matters. Why should someone? Again, it's about asking that question, that the audience that you're going to pitch this to, what would they care about, and why does it matter? So that that would be my answer for this. I know that's not really the most effective answer you would expect, that, oh, I'm going to use this template now to put my elevator pitch, but I hope this gives a framework of thinking.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. No, interesting, interesting. I mean, so I'll just give you a brief that I was at a pitch deck, hackathon, where we were supposed to give the pitch of 10 slides to the set of investors who were the juries in 4 minutes. It took me, 3 to 4 days to prepare myself how I will shorten my pitch and give it in 4 minutes. But even then, I couldn't finish it in 4 minutes. So I wonder how, the other founders are doing it, and that's the reason I asked this question to you.
Like Sachin mentioned, practice, practice, practice. It's this practice, this practice.
So Rakesh, I totally understand and am with Meenakshi when she says that, every situation, every startup, every company has its own context, and hence it's important
Yeah.
to understand context. And increasingly, as I'm spending time working in this field and coaching and consulting people, I realize that there's no one solution that fits all. Uh, uh, Having said that, some of the sort of templates or tips that I tend to work with or I've worked with in the past. I'm going to share three of them with you. So there's one method where you look at so whenever you're doing an elevator pitch, the idea is to be able to pique the interest of the other person, right? And hence, like Meenakshi said, then you get a follow-up meeting or something like that.
Hmm.
So one
Hmm.
startup that I worked with couple of years ago is called Deconstruct Skincare. The founder of the company is Malini. She's an IIT Kharagpur alumni. Wanted to build a science-based skincare brand, but didn't know how to articulate it. So, or rather, was facing some challenges in articulating it well. Though she herself is a class communicator, and we got connected. We started working together. So, I've used this framework called CCMC, which is Character, Conflict, Mentor, and Change. Right. So if you look at your startup like a story, and mostly what happens is we think that our startup is the hero, whereas I think it should be the customer or the audience that you're talking to. So if you look at the customer as the hero, so the story of Deconstruct Skincare was that most educated Indian women living in metros feel like they are being spoken down by mass market beauty brands who say that आप ये skin क्रीम लगा लो 4 शेड गोरे हो जाओ सारे इंटरव्यू पार कर जाओ and they feel like they're being spoken down to, and this is what Deconstruct
Hmm.
understands, that educated Indian women want information about what they're applying on their skin, and they do not want to be sold anything on an impulse through fairy tale marketing. And that's exactly what Deconstruct does. It provides effective products with high proportion of actives, but does not claim to help you become a serial interviewer. So information over impulse became the story of the company. So if you see this, uh, the character conflict, so character
Hmm.
educated Indian
Hmm.
woman,
Interesting. Yeah.
conflict is that they are being spoken down to by mass market beauty brands, mentors deconstruct skincare, and change eventually is that you will be able to get the skincare solution that you want, and that can be surmised into a, so just like how you have a movie, right? Like if you look at the movies, Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara might be a 2.5 hour movie, but ZNMD in itself communicates the theme of the story. So that's how you come up with a tagline, and you can use CCMC to be able to narrate the story of the startup, which can come down to about 30 seconds or 45 seconds, maybe a minute, etc. That's one way. The second thing that I've learned is to look at, now generally people need a hook when you start having a conversation. So what's the hook? So for instance, when I said that, I'm sure that you remember stories from the Mahabharata and your childhood superheroes. That's something that you're sort of asking a question or putting a thought into the audience's mind, so you get their attention. So that's hook. What I didn't follow up with, which I regularly do, is that despite and being all of us being storytelling animals, we tend to use what I call is business speak, which is a villain in all our lives. So and then that's why the story co actually helps or rather works with the power of stories through coaching, consulting, and training to help companies, startups, and individuals, multiply the success rate, so on and so forth. So that model you can call it as hook, villain, and vision. That's the third one, and that's the second one. The third one is fairly popular. It's I mean, McKinsey, one of McKinsey's consultants came up with the model, or at least identified the model, which is the inverted pyramid, where you put the most important thing upfront. So when you look at a newspaper article, the headline is the most important thing, right? So
Hmm.
it's almost like an inverted pyramid, the most important thing upfront. So
Right.
what's the point that you're trying to make? So even your TED talk, the headline of the TED talk is the most important thing upfront. So you can also sometimes, like for instance, one other startup founder that I worked with, there's a brand called Wellbe, which is trying to make sustainable contemporary wear, not like, I mean, like Fab India, but not for occasions, but for everyday use. So it's called Wellbe, and the tagline or the headline or the shorter version of the pitch is fast fashion. you are what you wear. Fast fashion is becoming a problem, and most of us, while we are buying organic millets for food, we still continue to wear polyester material, which takes about 250 years to disintegrate. And we understand that it's difficult because you do not have enough choices, and that's where Wellbe comes in. We are giving you a sustainable choice of workwear every day. That's broadly the pitch. So that one uses like sort of the inverted pyramid kind of model. So these are two, three things that people can think of. But again, like I said, uh, it's yeah. Sometimes we tend templates oversimplify things. I've had many instances where none of these
Hmm.
templates work for some of
No,
the startups that
actually,
I work with. Yeah.
yeah, I think also because every startup is different, every business model is different, and I believe that every startup deserves a chance to be heard. So the template doesn't really fit, at least not with my startup. Is that what I've observed? Okay, so Sachin, one more question. Now, when we give the presentation, usually since last 15 years of my corporate, I've been trained to focus on the data and interpret the data. But how do I dramatize that? Because storytelling is all about emotions and connecting with people. How do I make the data or talk about the data in a manner that it is connecting with people?
Yeah. So I think contextualizing data in real terms, right? What does it mean in real terms, and how can you share examples or anecdotes or the impact which people are able to visualize? So I think everything is about triggering a visual imagination in your audience's mind. And if
Okay.
they are able to do that, I mean, if you're able to do that, more often than not, you will be able to connect with them. So, for instance, if we there's an interesting example in this book called Stories at Work by Indranil Chakrabarti. IC is popularly known. He's arguably the one of, I mean, yeah, arguably the best storytelling coach in India, business storytelling coach in India. So he says that in one example, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, so I may not be getting everything right, but that, let's say, for instance, if you are presenting a report about we have seven deaths annually in our factory due to safety issues, right? And hence I am recommending that we should spend 2 crores to make our factory more safe, so
Hmm.
that we do not have any deaths in the factory. While this, for most people, this should be some kind of a wake up call, but because
Correct.
it's just data, it does not drive home an emotion. So your chances of getting the audience to follow your call to action may be low. But as opposed to
Hmm.
that, if you are able to create a better visual imagination, let's say, for instance, I say that I am coming back from the hospital, I met Ravi. Ravi is a very diligent worker for our company, and it's really sad to see that he's actually lost one of his legs. And while we will be giving the job to his wife, uh, Ravi's
Hmm.
life is not going to be the same anymore, and his family's life is not going to be the same anymore. And
Hmm.
the sad part is Ravi is not the only person. We've had seven such people losing either their limbs or their lives over the past 7 years at our factory, and all it needs is for us to be able to invest 2 crores, so none of our colleagues have to go through this ever, and we never have to face the guilt of not doing enough to save lives and to save the well-being of the people who work with us. Suddenly you see that the tone shifts, right? People feel more invested because it's more emotional, and there is a character that somebody is thinking about. So even if that board of directors or whoever does not know Ravi, but they are imagining a person lying on the hospital bed. Whereas if you just present people as data, then it doesn't drive home that point. So, I mean, this is one of the many techniques. So, how do you use anecdotes? How do you make things relatable? How do you build contrast between two different things? Uh, uh, there are many techniques, but this is one. So, I would say that just figure out how do you bring visual imagination in your audience's mind.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean that's a very insightful example, Sachin. Okay.
Can I add one,
Please, please.
just little, to support what Sachin is saying? So there's this saying that the death of millions, it's a statistic, and the death of one is a tragedy. and when someone feels a tragedy, they're much more moved to take an action about it. So that's how,
Hmm.
using characters, and we call it persona based storytelling, it helps a person imagine what's the real time impact of something, rather than just hearing that 70% are dying, 80% are, we are so used to information right now, coming at us. I mean, we are just flooded with data from every side, so much that we are impassive. We don't care so much. I mean, as humans, we should, we have emotions and we should be caring beings, but then when you hear a lot of too much, you just stop caring. But again, like bringing a character to it, somebody that one can relate to and create that picture in one's mind, that definitely drives more action.
Yeah, I think here one of the examples is a traditional news anchor versus First Post or Beyond International. The way the anchors of First Post and Beyond International talk, that actually connects you with the news, even if there is a lot of data to be shared.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, so Meenakshi, I'm sure that you give a lot of feedback on the pitch decks to the startup founders, and sometimes you have to be friendly, sometimes you have to be constructive. However, how do you find that balance between being constructive and friendly with the startup founders?
I'm always friendly when it, what it is that you're calling constructive, which is a euphemism for negative feedback. Even then, I'm friendly. So with our,
Well,
I mean, what I
looking at Meenakshi, can you imagine that she can be anything but friendly?
But
I do have those moments though, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
yeah,
so
so
I get your point.
please share
Feedback.
an example with us. Yeah.
So whenever we have deck reviews, so at the start of every review, I started off with a disclaimer saying that. Deck reviews. First of all, how we do deck reviews is that it's the first point of contact with a startup, maybe who's come to us, who might be willing to work with us, or not work with us, willing to improve their deck, which is why they reach out to us. And the deck review is something that we provide complimentary, free of cost to every startup, because we feel like our target group is may not even be a lot of startups who reach out to us. So a lot of startups are very early stage and they don't fall within the same audience of people who can afford our services always, but we always try to help them. So the deck review is something that we provide complimentary of cost. And always at the review, I always, the first disclaimer is that your business better than me. I am going to give you feedback based on you know the understanding I have of looking at this deck. So considering that this deck is the material that you are sending to an investor who is also seeing your deck for the first time, who doesn't have
Hmm.
an understanding of your deep understanding of your business as well. So that's the viewpoint. So I set the context that this is where I'm coming from, and this is why my feedback would be relevant, because I am in the same position as an investor who's seeing your deck for the first time. So that sort of sets the context for them that if something negative is coming, it's because I'm seeing it and perceiving it in this way. So that itself like helps them find places, points for improvement that they themselves might not see, right? So and I think telling them very clearly where something, telling someone very clearly where a constructive or negative, however you call that, feedback is coming from, it makes it much easier for them to accept it or know how to change it. I mean, how to deal with
Right.
that particular negative feedback as well. And feedback itself, like, it's a very interesting, like, I love digging into this whole world of feedback, how to give feedback better, because in our line of work, we operate on feedback. So for us also, like, we always tell the startups that you founders, they know their story better than us. Why they come to us is because we bring this external eye, right? We help them to zoom out of their story. Founders are so inside deep within their web tangles of everything that they're doing, that for them to be able to zoom out, it's very difficult. And then they end up talking about wanting to talk about each and everything to detail, and that leads to trouble, because आप किसी
Hmm.
को detail बताते रहोगे, तो it's not going to ensure that someone sees the big picture, right? And sometimes, and both of those things are important in a pitch, the big picture as well as details, but in the right in the right flow and in the right amounts. So we as external storytelling partners, we come in to help founders zoom out, and we put them in the position where we are creating the story and they give feedback on our work. So now they are in a position where they can judge if the story is working for them or not. So for us, I am at both the giving end of feedback and also receiving. So so it's a very interesting topic for me to always see how do we improve the way we give feedback, the way we receive feedback, the way we set the context for this feedback sharing to happen. And the feedback also trickles down to us, how we give feedback to our team who's working with us. So me and my partner, like Sandeep, we always tell each other and our team that feedback is not a reflection of who you are as a person. It's a feedback on the work, or feedback at the particular draft of the work. It's not a feedback on the person. So that always helps. And that's something, even if we don't explicitly tell to the founders also while giving them feedback, we try to bring that same vibe, so that they can improve the work and not feel like it's an attack on them, or you know see it that way, to make it constructive, basically.
Hmm. Right, right. So, Meenakshi, you spoke about having an interest in the audience. So my question to Sachin is, Sachin, considering that I have prepared a story, okay, and I'm giving a presentation to an audience, let it be like one-on-one or one-to-many. Is there a way to understand while giving the presentation that your audience is really getting captivated or interested in your story, or they are just
100%. 100%. 100%. You will always know. I mean, this is the best part about speaking, I feel, to a live audience, is where you are
Hmm.
looking at their faces, their body language, their engagement, and then having to make changes, because if you realize that, okay, this is not working for them, maybe I need to think of something else or bring up some other. So you can always understand. So how do you understand? Basically, if people are starting to look at their phones, or they are just sort of not making eye contact, looking away, looking at the floor, looking elsewhere, you will know that they are not interested. If they are not asking questions, of course, if you have opened the floor for questions, that is, and there are a lot of body language cues with which you will realize that whether they are being engaged with you or not. So, yes,
Live
Okay.
feedback.
Live
yes,
feedback.
yes.
So, no, actually, that brings us to one of our questions, because our audience is really interested in us. So, the question here is, which I'm sure Minashi can answer, is asked on LinkedIn by Mr. Anil Panda. He asks how D2C startup in home and living category can tell a story.
Okay. D2C startup in a home and living category. I think in this also persona-based storytelling can be, again, like very hard for me to answer this very specifically
Yeah,
without
because
having
it would require
details.
details. Yeah.
Yes, yes. But then a persona-based storytelling, like Sachin was describing before, where you bring in a character and you tell what was their life before, why their solution makes a difference in their lives, what positive changes or desired changes is this particular D2C, home and living brand is bringing to the customers, could be a great way to present the story. Because in this so there's this one example I'll give here. So I was once
Sure.
watching this Shark Tank episode of this is Shark Tank US, of this company called Doorbot. So this guy had a very elaborate pitch on Shark Tank. He had this big props and everything made to kind of story tell about why this doorbot. It is basically a video doorbell solution that they had created, and this is what he
Hmm.
was on Shark Tank. And but interestingly, none of the sharks funded him. None at all. Like they did not buy his pitch at all. But then it was not
Oh.
because the product was bad. Because a few years later, the same company was acquired by Amazon for, it was, I don't remember if it was multi-millions or $1 billion deal, but he made a lot of money basically. And also customers were buying this product in heaps. But why did the investors not buy into it? Like, investors are not fools. They are pretty aware of what's happening in the market. But what went
Mm.
wrong despite this elaborate pitch? So what happened was in this na the he was he in the pitch itself in Shark Tank. You can refer to this. You can see on YouTube the entire pitch. What happened was he was talking about the solution from. He was pitching like the investor was the customer. So telling that investor would, if I am on the door, the investor would see that some is not able to see who's at the door, and why this doorbot will basically it has Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. He was just mentioning features after features about why
Okay.
this doorbot
Mm.
was new and innovative in the market. But for investors, they were not the right target group of this particular product. They were somebody who have a lot of money and had access to the highest level of home home accessories available in the market. But what this guy was designing was actually for another target group. Say, somebody, a middle class person who is, working at a home office, is working in a garage, and some delivery person comes and rings the calling bell. It doesn't know, this guy is not able to get up and come, so the delivery goes amiss. And in that case, when they have this Wi-Fi doorbot, which is affordable as well, connected to their phone, it makes their lives much easier. So in this case, he got the character wrong. So when we are doing a persona based storytelling, it's very important to figure out who's the hero. Like Sachin was saying, the hero, it could be the audience. Audience in this case would have been the investors, but the investors were not heroes in this. The heroes were actually the users of this product, and through whose lives the story needed to be told. So I think in this case also, figuring out who is it for, that they are
Mm.
creating a solution for, and in what unique way, what first of all, what unique insights have they found about the lives that they lead today, and how
Mm.
their products are going to make their lives better. So that could be a
Okay.
story that for.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so I will now deep dive into the presentation and the pitch creation. So my question to you, Sachin, is that since you deal with startups at the earliest stages, how do you help them find the aha moment in their story, and that can grab investors' attention from the get-go?
Right. I mean, honestly, I feel that Meenakshi is probably better equipped to answer this because she works on pitch decks and working on pitch decks a lot more regularly. My work tends to be a lot more coaching oriented, where I help startup
Hmm.
founders figure out their story, but also a
Okay.
lot of leaders and executives now as to how can they communicate better using the power of stories. And I do programs for a lot of corporates, like Lead with
Okay.
Stories, movie like data presentations, etc. However, with my experience, what I can say is that how do you find the aha moment? See, the aha moment is an insight, right? That it's an insight. So to me, a lot of times when you are actually narrating a company story or pitching a company, it's almost like coming up with your own version of a TED talk. Now, like TED says that
Hmm.
ideas that spread, right, or ideas worth spreading. That's what it says. So if you are able to figure out a key insight, a key principle, a key belief on which your startup or your product is built, which is going to make lives better for people, that more or less tends to be the key. The aha moment. So, for instance, in deconstruction case, it is information over impulse. People are educated Indian women are tired of this fairy tale marketing. Hence, there's a company which is going to tell them, hey, we'll provide information, we will not make you buy things on an impulse. That makes sense. Another startup that I've worked with very closely to help them figure out the narrative is Camp Monk, which is a camping company, and that's how they were pitching the company earlier. And when we worked together, we realized that the founders' belief is that for the first time in the history of civilization, 60% of us are living in cities, in concrete jungles, and not in amidst nature. And his strong
Hmm.
belief is that the more we go back to nature, the more we will find ourselves and we will become better people, etc., etc. So Camp Monk's story or Camp Monk's aha moment was we help you find your true nature. So it's not just the nature that surrounds us in terms of trees and being in outdoors, etc. It's also about finding who you are. So Camp Monk, Find Your True Nature, I think was a Saha moment. Then a couple of others that come to mind. So for instance, this startup founder who I helped with the talk at Singapore Fintech Festival. Actually, his name is Karan Mehta. So Karan and I are going to work together. He's the co-founder of Ring and Kist, which are it's 800 million USD valued, very
Okay.
successful fintech company. He was going to give us talk at Singapore Fintech Festival, and he came up with a couple of ideas which he felt were worth pursuing, but he wasn't 100% convinced that this is what he wanted to talk about and whether it will help him stand out. So while having conversations, I kept realizing that he was always going back to founder friction, like friction between founders. That how they fight a lot as co-founders, and sometimes they stall a decision for weeks, etc., etc. And I just asked him a question: don't you think that's that's the idea that he should talk about? That how founder friction, despite all of it, the possibility that it can destroy a company, if you're able to deal with it in the right way, you can build something meaningful. So that became the talk eventually. But so what I'm trying to say is that the finding of your aha moment. So mostly in all the work that I've done, I see that when people start conversing, right, mostly we are used to talking about the regular stuff because we think that this is what I'm supposed to talk about, etc. Some of the key insights, key principles, and beliefs actually hide somewhere underneath, and you need to peel off that layers through conversations to come up with that one key insight on which your company is being built, or on which you're going to deliver your talk or your presentation. But that key insight to me is the aha moment. So yeah, so sometimes you arrive at it through conversations. Other times you arrive at it through exercises, and I'm sure in Meenakshi's case, it's also an iterative process. The more you put stuff on the PPT, the more you realize something, and the more you realize something, you put it on the PPT. So it goes. I think it's a cyclical sort of counterintuitive process as well, or rather, intuitive process.
So
I absolutely agree with Sachin. Like, it
I'll
is
give
the result of
I'll,
conversations.
I'll give you one of my examples. So, we try to focus on features, applications, benefits, and then we come to the value part. I wanted to understand if, because jumping directly to values would skip the reasons why this value is coming from. So is that a right approach, or should we talk about the value first and then talk about the FAB, features, application benefits?
I think it depends on the context in which you're using this. For example, say for if it's a pitch that you're giving to investors, I would always lead with value first because they might not be the customers of your solution. And in that case, telling them the features barely matters. Like in the example of the doorbot solution that I said, investors
Correct.
don't care that there is Wi-Fi or not, but they would care that there are 50 million people who could benefit from using that solution. So in this case, values first helps a person to help the audience to understand that why would a certain idea matter? Why would a certain solution product matter? But say in a sales pitch, even in a sales pitch, I always feel that values matters, value offering matter because a lot of times it's a unique value proposition, right? A way that someone, you know, a startup is doing something in a way that no one else had done it before. A certain value that was never there in society, is being
Hmm.
brought forward. So telling the features is kind of undermining, underplaying what really the big story is. So
Okay.
always leading with value proposition first, and then explaining how are you achieving that value, with certain features and
Hmm.
certain
Hmm.
that specifications is how I feel one should lead the storytelling, the narrative. So in this case, the inverted pyramid, like Sachin explained, would be that the main message would be about what value is being brought forward, and then explaining that value, the how articulating how that value is being realized through features as the subcontent of it.
Okay. So, Meenakshi, can you give us an example of a pitch deck which you have come across, which has created a moment of, the wow factor right from the start? Some opening slide that you would remember?
So for this, I will take you back to one of the first ever decks that I had built. So I entered this business as an purely by accident. Like I, as a person, I loved pitching. I loved public speaking. I was in
Okay.
architecture college and then industrial design college, and the
Hmm.
entire time we have to design on different work on different projects and then pitch it in juries. So
Right.
by the end of like 7, 8 years of education, I had become a pro at pitching. I mean, I really loved it also, as opposed to a lot of my batchmates who found it very daunting to pitch. They loved creating and designing and innovating, but pitching it to the stakeholder, pitching it to not just stakeholders, but jury members, academic faculties was something that not everyone loved, but for me I loved it. Like this was my moment of glory. Like despite how much work was being done, whether you felt fulfilled or not, but the moment where
Hmm.
you had to tell a story to someone about what is it that you built, I absolutely like adored that moment. So but still, like as once I passed out from college, I got placed in a campus recruitment. I was working in Infosys as a UX designer, so my background was in design. And
Hmm.
I thought that public speaking and pitching is just part of my soft skills. Sorry, I'm taking you much back to what the question that
No,
you
no,
asked, but I'll
of
get on.
course. Love to hear
Yeah.
your story.
So at one point, like very accidentally, I found not even it wasn't even me who found it. A friend of mine found a company which creates pitch decks for startups, and I
Hmm.
didn't even know what pitch decks was at this moment. So he said
Hmm.
that this might be something that you would love doing. Why don't you like see apply for this job? I was not interested, and I still thought, okay, let's see, it would be a practice in giving a job interview, another job interview. So that was the intention. I went into this, but the things really worked out, and like 2 months later I am in this new office, and I'm assigned with creating the deck for Instamojo. At this point I'm still I'm supposed to be the communication designer on this, not even creating the
Okay.
story, but I told my boss in the beginning that I would love to be part of creating the narrative because that seems very interesting to me. So he said that you could shadow me. I said, okay, like I will, I was a designer, so I would also shadow him in the narrative part. And then the narrative that we were building on at this point of time, like that out of discussions that was being built was that Instamojo helps people come online. So at this point, and I was in charge with creating the graphics for this story, and I was just not feeling right. Like coming online, did this even mean in that time? This was in 2019, so I felt like I went and told my boss that I don't feel right about this because everybody is online, isn't it? Everybody's anyways online. Why don't we just create a story for this? Am I? I think my internet is it?
Yeah, now it's
Are you
audible.
able to hear me?
We lost you for a
Okay,
second.
cool.
No issues. Yeah.
Okay, no worries. So my, my thought was that why are we saying that we are helping people to be online? Everybody's online these days in different measures. Somebody, is online by being on Google Maps. Somebody is online
Hmm.
by being on Instagram. Somebody's online by being on Facebook. Somebody's online by having their own website. This
Yeah.
everybody is already online. So what is Instamojo really doing? So the entire narrative was formed at that time that um,
Sorry.
the age of non-online businesses is over, and Instamojo helps people to be more online. So if somebody is, say, just on Google Maps, existing just on Google Maps, they can become more online by having their social media profile. To somebody who's selling on social media, is somebody who can have their own website and sell better. Like everybody having being more online gives people more benefits on the way they can run and scale their business. So Instamojo is the partner who helps people to be more online. So this aha moment, achieving this aha moment was like very satisfactory to me because this was part of the first story narrative creating process that I was in. And also the founder Sampath Swain, he was so happy with this line that Instamojo helps people to be more online. He was posting about it on LinkedIn and all. And at that point of time, I feel like, wow, like I feel so privileged to have, been part of this aha moment. And since then, yeah, every time we help a founder find this aha moment, find this deep insight about why they why they're, what they're doing really matters. Every time it is super satisfying. So whenever we create case studies of before after of our client projects and figuring it out, like finding out how we changed, their narrative from something that was we do XYZ to, you know, this is how the world is changing and we are, helping this change happen in a positive way.
Hmm.
I mean, it's different for everyone. Like it's really very satisfying.
Yeah.
It helps also to
True.
helps us also understand the world better.
Yeah. True. True. Okay. So Meenakshi, you mentioned that we should, definitely talk about the value and try to connect with the value with our audience. So my question to you, Sachin, here is that when you're showcasing your product's feature, okay, or when you're unveiling your product's feature rather, how do you move beyond just the dry technical specs and create a narrative story about your product features?
Creating a story or narrative about your product features. Uh,
Yes.
so so the store see every step of the way can be turned into, like I said, something that triggers visual imagination in people.
Hmm.
However, when it comes to story or narrative, I believe that there is a and story may not be the right word for it. I generally tend to use the big story. By big story, you mean to say the narrative of the company. So, for instance,
Correct.
if you look at
Hmm.
Airbnb, it's belong anywhere. If you
Hmm.
look at Google, at least in its early days, it was making information, organizing the world's information and making it accessible. uh, of course, Nike is
Yes.
just do it, Apple is think different, etc. So generally there is a single narrative that that is what the company is pitched with. And there are many different ways of building these narratives. However, you first start off by talking about the problem that you're trying to solve, right? That what exactly is the problem and why is the problem even important. So I think we've come to a stage where problems actually don't matter so much anymore, because there are so many problems that all of us need to solve, and brands are telling us all the time that you need to solve every problem. What now matters is how do you sell the problem itself, because if you're able
Hmm.
to sell the problem, then the solution will more or less sell itself. Now, when you come down to the solution, which I believe is are the features, right? In that, you can of course use different techniques of how you use an example or an anecdote. So, for instance, if you're doing customer transformation story, so rather than me talking about the coaching program that I run, which is founder storytelling, 6 weeks, etc., etc., I spoke about Malini Adapureddy, IIT Kharagpur alumni, deconstruct skincare information over impulse. Malini then used the story in her investor pitch deck and in her customer communication, also started building a team around it, and she was able to raise 2 million pre-seed from Kalari Capital. Now that's a success story, right? So
Hmm.
then you can go on and talk about the fact that, hey, the process to do this is this. So for instance, there's a good storytelling framework, especially for brands, called Story Brand. If you look at Story Brand, it has a 7-step process. I mean, I sort of just condense it and say it's CCMC, character, conflict, mentor, change. But the mentor has two things. One is empathy and authority, right? And you
Hmm.
are pitching yourself as the mentor. And within
Hmm.
that empathy and authority, then you also have to present a plan. So, for instance, it's almost like Lord Krishna telling Arjuna that, hey, you know what, Parth, listen to me, because I am really wise, okay? And all of those things. I am wise because one, two. So, what's the empathy? I am really invested in you because you are my mentee. I am driving your chariot because of that reason, despite being omnipresent and all powerful, etc., because you really matter to me, and I also have knowledge of the seven worlds and all space and time. That's the authority that he's able to showcase, but he also needs to give a plan, and that plan especially essentially is that part of Bhagavad Gita which Lord Krishna is giving the discourse to Arjun about what are the principles by which you should live life. The same way, a product's features can become a part of the plan that you are propagating to people. So, for instance, Airbnb's story is belong anywhere, which means that that if you're traveling and you stay in a 5-star hotel or you stay in a hotel can be impersonal and it may look same whether it's in New York or it's in New Delhi, right? And that's not why we travel. We travel because we want serendipity, we want surprises, we want to be able to make connections, and hotels are not
Hmm.
providing that. And hence, there's Airbnb, who helps you belong anywhere. By so now the features is that you actually have hosts who are letting you stay in their homes or in properties which are managed by them. So along with a home, you're also getting a person who's an insider of the city, who will be able to help you feel a sense of belonging. And hence, when you use Airbnb, you truly belong anywhere, and that's what humans are supposed to do. So Airbnb is not your the hero in the story. The hero is the traveler, and Airbnb is the Lord Krishna who's helping him or her, belong anywhere in this world. So
Hmm.
so as a part of that narrative, then the features become a part of the mentor's plan, is what I'd like to believe. I mean, there's another model which Andy
Right.
Raskin on LinkedIn, so because I think this is also being streamed on LinkedIn, a lot of people can easily access Andy Raskin's writings. It's called Strategic Narrative, where you look at the old world versus the new world. And he says that, there's this is how things used to be. In the future, it's going to be like this. But you know what? I'm here to help you build the gap or build the bridge between these two. Now that gap, that bridge that you're building is basically your product features. Our product works because one, two, three. So yeah, so that's what it is. And sometimes I don't think there's uh, there's too much of a need of storyfying the product features, because you've already built a narrative around the product itself. So the features in some cases can just be straightforward, which is just seeding in or adding to the narrative that you're building as to why people should choose the problem that you're pitching to solve, and hence why they should also choose the solution.
Right, right. Cool. Guys, we are almost at the end of our webinar, right? There is too much to talk about, but right. But at the end, I want to bring a fun element to our webinar. So I'll give 60 seconds to Sachin to tell us how to use storytelling to convince your spouse.
Yeah, how to use storytelling to convince your spouse. Okay, so that's an
Yeah.
interesting one. And I think my wife and I joke that part of the reason why she's married to me is because I narrate great stories. So I
Awesome.
think I've used it enough. So so I also have this thesis that I think people who are really good at narrating stories can actually lead much better lives,
Hmm.
because storytelling is not just about pitching better or selling a product or something. It's much deeper. If you have the ability to make people visualize what
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
talking about, and hence why they should take a certain decision, then you have
Hmm.
much better chance of people around you, your spouse, your partner, your kids, etc., learning so many things. uh, I mean, I don't mean to say that as a husband I have anything that I can teach my wife. My wife is smarter than I. But what I mean to say is that, so for instance, one example is that we wanted to move to Mysore, right?
Hmm.
Uh, I was the one who came up with that idea, because I had come to Mysore in 2016, really fell in love with the city. We are from Bombay. I told Sarika and I got married in 2017, and we decided, and I told her, hey, you know what? I'm interested in moving to Mysore at some point. Um, and then the storytelling part is that storytelling is show don't tell, right? So I actually planned a trip to Mysore along with my family, got them here. We stayed here for 2 weeks. I mean, that wasn't the plan, but this was the time that floods happened in Coorg, Kerala, and everywhere across. So our 2 weeks meant that we were holed in Mysore, and we got to see every place, and everybody really loved it. So that's literally taking people and showing them what a place looks like, and hence they can take a decision. But the same
Hmm.
way, if you're able to transport people into the future, hey, you know what? So more often than not, in
Yeah.
relationships and people at home, we just tend to be very instructive, right? Do this
Hmm.
because this is why, because I'm asking you to. And that's how
I'm
parents also deal with kids. But if you have and Sadhguru, I think, has this fantastic ability to explain the why behind everything. So if you have the patience and the knowledge to come up with a short, concise narrative, or a story or an anecdote as to why something is beneficial for the person who you are talking to, then I think you can actually, yeah, lead a very good life, and That's the effort that I am putting in every day by learning storytelling. People think it's my business. It's not. It's just my effort to lead a better life.
Okay, fun question for Meenakshi. Meenakshi, we we need a story to narrate it to a child to eat tomatoes.
Okay. Hmm. I think a story for a child to eat tomatoes. So many ways to
Yeah.
do that. I would just maybe, play with the tomatoes first with them, tell them that there is something really fun inside this, that if you can,
Hmm.
you can put your, like, you can pierce through the tomato inside, you will find this little diamond gems. I mean, for a child, I think, to get them to eat vegetables, I used to be a very picky eater also, but I used to like
Hmm.
playing with things. So if you could
Hmm.
tell me, like, and I was also a very imaginative child, like I had
Hmm.
names and stories around everything in my house, like everything
Hmm.
was a character to me, and I was living in this fairy tale land. So I think, making that thing part of a fairy tale in some way. So I don't know if it will work on every child, but if it was me as a child, I would say that I would find some these little diamond fairies inside, which the tomato seeds would be. If I could play with it, and then if I eat it, I would get some superpowers. Get them to imagine and be the little. Every child is also very distinctive. Some you would see are all dreamy, and some are already born very logical. I mean, I have kind of noticed that in children, that they are born with certain kind of a nature already. So I think
Yeah.
that particular story has to appeal to that child's nature as well. So I don't know if that's a good answer. I don't have kids. Maybe that's why my answer is yes. But yeah,
Okay. Great, guys. It was fantastic session, and thank you so much for enlightening us with wonderful examples. Sachin, Meenakshi, both of you, really helped us, and I'm sure a lot of founders would take a lot of notes from here. Just a message, guys. I will be mentioning all the links that the books and everything that Sachin and Meenakshi spoke about. So that will be mentioned in the description. So great, guys. Any ending note from you, Sachin, Meenakshi?
how would you make a child eat a tomato?
Oh,
I'm
well, my daughter is very fascinated about the space and stars, so I tell her that the red tomato is actually a red sun, and if you eat it, then your tummy would also glow and your skin would glow. So that way.
nice, nice. Leading with the value proposition.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, Rakesh and Sachin. It was brilliant to hear from you and how you approach storytelling.
Yeah. Cool. No, fantastic. Thanks a lot, Rakesh, Meenakshi, both of you. As always, uh, discussing and narrating or sharing stories is
Hmm.
invigorating. And I always say that stories mean success, and we need to create and narrate many more of them. So, yeah,
Right.
that's my closing note.
Great, guys. So keep posting in your comments, keep posting in your questions, and if we will have more, we will answer more. I'm sure Meenakshi and Sachin would be happy to answer your questions in the comments. And we will see
Absolutely.
you at the next episode. Goodbye. Good evening. Bye.
Cool. Bye
Bye.
bye. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
Rakesh, for
you.
organizing this.
Bye.
Thanks, Meenakshi.
Bye bye.